Well, we've got the preliminaries out of the way. Now the fun begins. In this video, we begin to explore markup, style, and actions, actually producing web content. The purpose of every web page is communication. There are three aspects of this: content, presentation, and interaction. The content must be clear and compelling, while the presentation should support the content visually. Interaction provides feedback and responsiveness. Content is conveyed through text and images, while presentation is conveyed partly through markup that describes page structure and partly through style directives. Interaction is provided through awareness of and responsiveness to events. Note that no amount of style tweaking can overcome bad writing, so be sure to have text that clearly conveys your intent. The visible content of a web page is constructed as part of the body element. Here we examine the body element as well as these text markup elements, all of which are destined to be contained within the body of a document. P, paragraph. H1 through H6, headings. BR, line breaks. PRE, pre-formatted text. We also introduce the concept of events in anticipation of creating web pages that interact with the viewer to enhance the desired communication. So, let's begin. We start with the body element. Its purpose is to define or enclose the entire content of a web page. The syntax is a start tag, body, possibly some attributes, the entire content, and the end tag. The start tag and end tag are optional, but we recommend you code them. There's a couple of global attributes you might find useful here. Style, which provides style information that applies to the whole document unless explicitly overridden elsewhere. And class, a space-separated list of classes, and a reminder, a class is a collection of style properties. So let's look at the style attribute for a moment. The style attribute consists of the values of one or more style properties. The syntax is style equals quote, property name, colon, value, semicolon, repeated as often as necessary, and then close quote. One property is background-color, which defines the color of the background, and just color, which defines the color of the foreground, the color of text. So both of these particular properties are color-focused, color-related. How do you specify their values? Color-related property values can be specified several ways. One is standard color names. So black, silver, gray, white, maroon, red, purple, fuchsia, green, lime, olive, yellow, navy, blue, teal, and aqua. There are other ways to specify color values, and those are specified in the standard. w3.org/tr/css-color-3. Here's an example of using a style attribute. On the left-hand side is a very simple web page, and on the right-hand side is that page displayed in a browser. Now, if we add style information and then refresh the browser, we can see the impact of the background color and color style properties on the display. Of course, these properties can be overridden by coding style attributes in any nested elements, much more later. Now we turn our attention to events. HTML elements are sensitive to events, which are actions that take place in working with HTML documents. For example, mouse clicks, keyboard entry, that sort of thing. Elements can specify an action to take or the name of a script to get control when an event occurs. A script is a string of one or more programming instructions. The specifications of event responses are set up as attributes of the elements that you want to respond to events. The attribute names for events are of the form on name of the event. If no response is specified, an event is ignored. There are over 50 events specified in HTML5. Here are the most important events in the form of attributes. An element has an on-click event if a mouse button is pushed while the cursor is over the element. The on-mouse down and on-mouse up events take the on-click event and break it into two separate events, which you can process. On double-click is an event that you can catch. On key down, on key press, on key up all have to do with events related to keyboard entry. The instructions or script included in an on-event name attribute is called an event handler. Here's an example of an on-click event handler in a paragraph tag. And now, here's how it displays on the screen in a browser. And if I click on me, that's an event. And this is what happens. Now we return to text markup and we focus on the P element, the paragraph element. Its purpose is to delimit blocks of text. The syntax is a start tag, P, possibly some attributes, then the paragraph text and an end tag. The start tag and end tag are optional, but we highly recommend you code them. Some possibly useful global attributes here include ID. Among all elements that have an ID attribute within a document, the value of each ID must be unique in a case-sensitive way. This is primarily used for referencing an element in a script. The style attribute is information that applies to the whole paragraph unless explicitly overridden. The class attribute, a space-separated list of style classes we've talked about. The title attribute, this is the title attribute for tooltips, not the title element. And you might be interested in some of these events, any of on-click, on-mouse up, on-mouse down, on double-click, on key down, on key press, and on key up. Now here's a simple example where we have a paragraph tag and it says this text will display as a single line. And in fact, in a browser, that's how it comes out. It's a short line. However, this text is a little more complicated. It has a paragraph tag, text runs on, there's a blank line, and it says it will display as one line or wrap to several depending on the current screen resolution, window size, font indentation, and so on. Note that the above blank line and explicit new lines are ignored as long as the text is embedded in one paragraph element. And indeed, here's how it displays. What's happening here is that earlier we mentioned the browsers reduce insignificant white space to a single space. Extra spaces, which includes blank lines, new lines, tabs, and so on, are consolidated within the paragraph. Here we examine the headings elements. There are 6 of them, H1 through H6, and their purpose is to visually organize the following paragraphs. The syntax is a start tag, H1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, possibly some attributes, the heading text, and an end tag to match the start tag. And the start tag and end tag are both required here. The standard says you should not think of the H1, H2, H3, H4, H5, H6 as a hierarchy of importance. Rather, think of them as a variety of available heading types. Good advice, I believe, although in reality, people tend to think of these as most important to least important. The global attributes you might use here are the usual suspects, so there's nothing new to say. In this example, we have an H1 tag, currency exchange, followed by a paragraph with more information. Putting this in a browser displays it like this. Now we come across the unusual line break element, BR. Its purpose is to break a line of text and start a new line. The syntax is simply a start tag, BR, which is required, an end tag is forbidden. This element only makes sense when it is nested within some phrasing content element such as P or a header. There are no attributes of interest or use here. In this example, I want to demonstrate using BR to help set text aside, make it more visually stand out. And so here I inserted two BR tags. The first one's going to start a new line so that to give it some emphasis is on its own line, and then another BR tag to make sure that that total line is by itself. Let's see how that might look. Well, there we go. However, wouldn't it be nice if maybe there was a blank line around it? So we could do this. We could try two consecutive BR tags, the first to end the current line and the second to insert a blank line, and then have your text. And indeed, this is how it displays. But there's one more step I'd like to take. I'd like to have that middle line maybe indented a little bit. That might give it a little more emphasis. So here's a new trick and technique. I insert not only the two BR tags, but something new, (NBSP semicolon). That string stands for non-breaking space. That is, it's a space that will not be considered to be insignificant, so it will not be collapsed like browsers are wont to do. It will actually represent a space. So here I'm forcing three spaces to give me some indentation. This (NBSP semicolon is called a character entity reference, which is a set of methods for describing characters not available on your keyboard. The web page for this course has a link to a brief paper on this. It's useful but not required reading, and we'll be sure to include other character entity references and define them for you as the occasion arises. In any event, here's how this displays. Notice that the middle line is indented, so that's a trick and technique that you might find useful from time to time. Finally, in this lesson, we look at pre-formatted text, the pre element. Its purpose is to accept text that is to be displayed exactly as entered. The syntax is a start tag, pre, possibly with some attributes, your pre-formatted text, and an end tag. The start tag and the end tag are both required. According to the standard, the pre element tells browsers that the enclosed text is pre-formatted and that browsers should leave whitespace intact, render text with a fixed width font, should disable automatic word wrap, and must ignore any leading new line character immediately following the pre-element start tag. Once again, the global attributes are the usual suspects, so nothing new need to be said about these guys. In this example, on the left-hand side, we see the code with the pre-element showing some forced line breaks and a blank line inserted. And on the right side, we see that element displayed in our browser. So you might find pre-formatted text just the thing, useful for displaying computer code, columnar data, song lyrics with chords, all without having to use (NBSP). So that's it for this lesson then. We've covered a lot of information. We've defined these elements: body, P, H1 through H6, BR, and PRE. We've introduced two style properties, background-color and color. We discussed how to specify values for color-related properties. We introduced the concept of events, and we introduced the concept of character entity references. Coming up, so far, we've tested examples just using our browser locally. The next lesson, Infrastructure, discusses the details in setting up a real website on a server. If you don't need that or are not ready to do that, go on to the following lesson about links and anchors. You can always come back to the infrastructure lesson when you're ready. See you there.